This is the U.S. Report with James Morrow.
Good evening and welcome to the program. Coming up tonight, a stormy day in New York as a judge's attempts to shut down Trump fall flat. Plus, who's in pole position? Trump's ahead, but we have the expert on swing state races who says this ain't over yet. Plus, the White House set to limit Joe Biden's public speeches even more. Gosh, I wonder why. But first, the full supine cowardice, the weak-willed idiocy, the jelly-brained determination of the Biden administration to throw over decades of American strategy, to say nothing of one of America's strongest allies, for no other reason than to gain tactical advantage in the November election. Well, that was put on display for the whole world to see over the past 24 or so hours. You see, after months of trying to manage Israel's response to the atrocities of October 7, and years of acting like a pal to both Tehran and Tel Aviv, the Biden administration decided this week it finally had to pick one side or the other. So, can you guess who Blundering Joe and his merry pack of swamp rats chose? Was it Israel? The thriving democracy that welcomes all faiths, treats women as equals, and frankly doesn't care what you get up to with whom in the bedroom? Or Iran, the theocratic dictatorship where women are whipped or worse for not properly covering their hair, and which makes a public sport of hanging gays and sexual minorities. Oh, and which also is, of course, the sponsor of Hamas. And because let's not forget that Iran, which was behind Hamas committing October 7th, because it wanted to derail the peace process between Israel and Sunni Arab nations, just as they worried about the rise of Tehran's evil influence around the world and the Middle East, and Hamas, which uses psychotically violent tactics as its levers against Israel. Well, given the two, who do you think Joe Biden sided with here? I mean, as Israel is on the verge of, it hopes, finally crushing Hamas and ending the outfit's reign of terror once and for all. As the saying goes, roll the tape.
I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. We're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond to attacks like came out of the Middle East recently. But it's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah.
So let's get this straight here. If Israel wants to, pretty reasonably, if you ask me, use the threat of going into Rafah and the Gaza Strip to finish off Hamas as leverage in its negotiations, well, that's no good. Biden instead wants Israel, and has been pressuring them on this front for months, to sign a ceasefire that will give Hamas and its leadership the chance to regroup, rebuild, and launch missiles and terrorist attacks and Lord knows what heinous replays of October 7th without necessarily giving up any of the hostages who they have not yet murdered. Well, what Joe Biden has just done is, I think, they've given a gift to Hamas, but not just Hamas, but a gift to Iran that is even bigger than the billions of dollars in funds the Biden administration released for Tehran that were clearly used to help pay for October 7th. The New York Post summed it up really well. One word: betrayed. And that's a pretty good word for what happened. But Biden's behavior also sounds a lot like what Democrats fret about what Donald Trump would supposedly do if he becomes president again. You know, selling out America's closest allies and cozying up to dictators. Why, it's almost like when Trump was accused of encouraging Putin to do whatever the hell he wants in Europe, and everybody lost their ever-loving minds. Of course, that's not really what Trump said. He said Europe needed to pay its defense bills, but forget that. That's all just fevered leftist fantasy. The reality, the lived reality, to borrow a phrase, is that Joe Biden, the Democrat president of the United States, just said exactly that to Iran. Hey, mullahs, go do whatever the hell you want to Israel. They're just, an ally we've had around since 1948 or something. So why? Why would he do this? What's the point? Oh, here's the thought. Maybe Joe Biden just discovered that he is actually also a fundamentalist Ayatollah, that he was raised in the Shiite madrasa, just like when he said he was raised in the black church, the Jewish shul, and the ethnic foods aisle of the Wilmington Price Chopper supermarket. No, I don't think so. I think what happened here is that Biden and his people looked at the poll numbers, looked at Israel, looked at the poll numbers again, and told the Jews, Mazel tov, you're on your own. The longer the conflict in Gaza drags out, you see, the worse it is for Joe Biden. And here are two big reasons why. Number one, the campus protests, which are still making news around the world, and which now see young people who should be among the Democrats' most loyal voters calling the president Genocide Joe. How's that for gratitude for all those student loan cancellations, hey? Kids these days. Here's a little bit of a media mashup of commentators freaking out that these protests are doing a ton to help Trump.
The campus protests are playing out over there on the presidential campaign trail. Donald Trump trying to use the issue against President Biden.
When you look at these protests, these images, do you think to yourself, wow, this is a real in-kind contribution to Donald Trump?
The unrest is now threatening to become an election issue.
They're clearly trying to create echoes to 1968 and the anti-Vietnam War, anti-war protests.
The 1968 analogy does not bode too well for Democrats.
In 1968, Richard Nixon celebrated the non-demonstrators and was elected to the presidency. And the title of David Brooks' piece, Why the Protests Helped Trump.
And the other issue, of course, is the Muslim vote, particularly in key must-win states like Michigan, where Arab and Muslim communities are absolutely seething about anything that looks like support for the little Satan of Israel from the big Satan of the United States. Might want to turn down the heat on that melting pot. I think it's going to boil over. But this adds a whole nother dimension to this. You see, the quid pro quo Biden laid out in that CNN interview, do what I say, Israel, don't go into Rafah or I'll withhold aid because I need you to do what I say for my own political reasons. Well, again, that's also precisely what Biden accused Trump of doing, withholding aid to Ukraine unless they opened an investigation into Hunter Biden. Gosh. And even just 5 short years ago, Biden said that despite his opposition to settlements and his own problems with Bibi Netanyahu, the idea of cutting off military aid to Israel was preposterous.
But the idea that we would cut off military aid to an ally, our only true ally in the entire region, is absolutely preposterous. It's just beyond my comprehension anyone would do that.
Our only true ally in the region. Well, the saddest thing is that none of this politically will work. I mean, think about it. Once someone's calling you Genocide Joe, it's pretty hard to get their vote back. But it reveals just how low Biden and his people will stoop, selling out an ally when they are in the middle of trying to negotiate with Hamas for hostages of which 5 are believed to be Americans, by the way, while tipping the balance of power into Hamas's favor because there's a few votes in it? What message does that send to all of America's other allies? Honestly, Joe, how low can you go? Joining me now is former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, great to have you here, but what about this unbelievable betrayal, and I don't think there's any other word for it, of Israel, with Joe Biden saying it will stop supplying Israel weapons if they push ahead with their offensive on Rafah? I mean, this from the same guy who said once upon a time said cutting off aid to Israel would be preposterous, and it looks like a political quid pro quo. How transactional and boneheaded is this?
It's political, James. And keep in mind, Donald Trump was impeached for much less than this when he temporarily froze aid to Ukraine because of corruption. This is bizarre, but this is political. And here's what Joe Biden's trying to do. He's trying to have it both ways. There are elements of the Democrat Party that want to support Israel, and there are elements of the Democrat Party that do not want to support Israel. And he's trying to do both. Keep in mind, the Democrat support for the aid package that Biden is now withholding was tremendous in the United States House of Representatives and the Senate. But on the other side of the equation, he does have these protesters and college campuses, young voters threatening not to vote for him. And let's not forget, we've talked about it in this program before, the block of Palestinian American voters in some swing states, including Michigan. So, as is so often the case, he's trying to have it both ways, and he's getting killed on both sides for it.
Yeah, but that's the whole nature of this foreign policy. It dates back to the Obama days, this idea that we're going to try and make Iran legitimate and give them kind of a sphere of influence in the Middle East, which, of course, was totally insane to anybody who'd ever read a book about the subject. But just on the question of these protests, how much are they actually now playing into the hands of Donald Trump? I know that in 2020, when we had the Black Lives Matter protests, those really played into the hands of the Democrats. But this now round of protests, it seems like every election year we get them, this seems to be something that's going to turn off the mainstream.
Yeah, I had a fascinating conversation with a group of my Democrat and Republican friends in Washington just this week. And what it seems to remind everybody, of course, nobody remembers it anymore because of how long ago it is, but in terms of an academic sort of perspective, reminds everybody a lot of 1968 and the Vietnam War protests and how that disrupted the Democrat Party at that time and gave us 2 elections for Richard Nixon. When law and order became an issue, the Republicans did very, very well. That's sort of the way it feels here today, that even swing voters are looking at these protests going, you know what, I'm all for free speech, but anti-Semitism is a bridge too far. And if Biden's not going to do anything about it, and he's not, I'll consider voting for Donald Trump. So you're already starting to see that filter through. The better comparison is not 2020, it's 1968.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. And also, there's also this other issue of turnout, too, because, of course, the Democrats have always relied so much on those young voters coming out. But, if a large block of young people are now calling him Genocide Joe, well, that's a problem for the Democrats, isn't it?
It is. Keep in mind, I taught a class this past semester at the University of Chicago, and the Democrat Party was handing out flyers calling him Genocide Joe and calling on the Democrats to not have their convention in Chicago. Keep in mind, where was the Democrat convention in 1968? Chicago. So if history doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it does rhyme. This is a major, major problem for the Democrats, and it is hurting Joe Biden politically without question. Yeah, no, it is wild. And just back to the foreign policy side of it, too, and this great theme of betrayal of a U.S. ally. And let's remember, Trump was always accused of selling out U.S. allies to cozy up to dictators. Well, less than a day before the Biden administration announced its intent to cut off the arms sales to Israel, check this out. They also issued a sanctions waiver to bypass congressional prohibitions on arms sales to Arab nations that boycott the Jewish state, including Hamas ally Qatar, where a whole bunch of Hamas bigwigs are living in hotel suites, as well as Iran-controlled Lebanon. At some point, this kind of both sidesism really does feel like they're actually taking the other side. It is. They can't do it as aggressively. Keep in mind, I think left to his own devices, Joe Biden is pro-Israel. He has been for a long time. So what you're seeing him do now is sort of react politically, and that's always going to lead. You have to be yourself if you're going to be the president of the United States. And he's, again, trying to be himself and be something else at the same time. The deal, that news broke here in the last 24 hours, and it's absolutely all over the news here about how people were upset enough about not funding Israel, not giving them bombs. It was the lead editorial in many of the newspapers here today. But then to find out in the next breath that he was going ahead and allowing sales to Qatar and to Lebanon on is really got him in hot water. And you're right. It sort of looks like, you know, he says to himself, well, I was pro-Israel for a while. Now I'm going to be anti-Israel and see if I can get away with it. Tough sell for the American voters.
Look, let's move on, though, because there is this Stormy Daniels thing still kicking around here. And Judge Merchan, the judge in the case, has denied Trump's call for a mistrial or a modification of the gag order, saying that he should be able to shield himself against Stormy Daniels' salacious and prejudicial testimony. Have a look at what Donald Trump had to say outside court just yesterday.
He's a corrupt judge, and he's totally conflicted. And I got to get back on the campaign trail. I'm not supposed to be here. We are so innocent. There's never been anything like it. It's a disgrace to the city of New York, to the state of New York, and to the country.
Punchy words there from Donald Trump. How is this all, though, playing out? I mean, are Americans even tuned into this, or is this just something that people on CNN like to talk about? You know, ooh, look what Stormy Daniels said Trump did, blah, blah, blah.
Well, they've tuned in for the last couple of days because of the salaciousness of the testimony, which of course is what the Democrat Attorney General wanted in the first place. This case is not really about business records. That's really boring. It makes for bad television. No one wants to watch it. But the democratically elected Attorney General in New York wanted this testimony because he thinks it'll make Donald Trump look bad. All the stories about infidelity, the stories about sex with alleged sex with an adult film star, an adult dancer. This is what this case is about, not about the records. I don't think it's moved the needle, James. Keep in mind, show me the person in America who hasn't made up their mind about whether or not Donald Trump, is the type of person that they like or they don't like. I don't really think this is going to change. It makes the DA and the judge very popular at cocktail parties here on the island of Manhattan, where I'm sitting. But I don't think it moves any voters. Are they watching? Yes, because it's must-see TV and will be for the next couple of days. But this is not what the case is about. The case is about records, and that tends to bore people tremendously.
Yeah, I mean, very, very quickly, is this a bit of a flashback to Ken Starr going after Bill Clinton for lying about an affair? And everybody said, Bill Clinton, come on, let's go on and talk about more important things.
Yeah, keep in mind the Bill Clinton impeachment case was about lying and perjury, not about sex with Monica Lewinsky. And look what happened at the end of that process. Bill Clinton was more popular after that proceeding than he was before. There's a really good chance Donald Trump falls into that same category.
I think you're absolutely right. Mick Mulvaney, thanks so much for your time here on the U.S. Report. Let's go to our next guest, Fox News contributor Joe Concha. Joe, thanks so much for coming on the U.S. Report. And Joe Biden, I tell you what, he's not looking too great. First, we had the stories that all of his aides had to walk around him when he was going to the helicopter so that he didn't, show off his stumbles too much. And now his handlers are reportedly, quote, looking to shorten his speeches in what a Biden campaign spokesman claims is about an effort to have quality over quantity. Now, I'm not buying this. What about you, Joe?
Oh, I think that if you're trying to win the presidency again, you can't do it by pleading the fifth, right? And to shorten Biden's speeches, it only makes sense because we've seen him time and again lose battles against teleprompters where he's literally reading, and you know what these are, James, cues in the teleprompter. So when he's told to pause after a sentence, he's literally reading the word pause. Or yesterday, he read a speech about a guy that he said was drafted by the Green Bay Packers, and his name was Riley, last name, right? Literally said that. So it's Ron Burgundy over and over again. And then if Biden goes off script, then it's cleanups on aisles 5, 16, 24, and 31, as far as either some sort of blatant lie that could be easily fact-checked, exaggeration that could be fact-checked, or some story that makes zero sense. So here we have the sitting president of the United States, the so-called leader of the free world, and his handlers are petrified to put him out there in any way, shape, or form because they know that he's not aging like a fine wine, but like cottage cheese at this point.
Well, yeah, indeed. I mean, cottage cheese, does that go well with his Uncle Bosie, who apparently got eaten by cannibals the other week, according to him? But, as you say, it's like the teleprompter. If I was to just simply say, Google bans Trump ad, which is the prompt in front of me, he would just read that instead of saying last week a pro-Trump ad targeting black voters in Georgia was removed by Google for allegedly violating policy. Joe, let's have a quick look at this policy violation.
Hello, I'm with the Biden campaign.
Yeah, I voted for Biden last time.
That's fantastic.
Is it? Everything costs more. Food, gas, rent.
Okay, but Biden's helping pay rent for newcomers to America from around the world.
You mean illegal immigrants? I'm struggling to pay my bills, but Biden's paying rent for illegals? They get handouts and I'm paying for it.
But Biden can still count on your vote, right?
Things were better before Biden. I'm voting for Trump.
Clearly that ad was so effective, someone just didn't want people to see it. Is this a sign of things to come with big tech trying to put their thumb on the scale of the coming election?
James, we've seen this movie over and over again as far as big tech getting involved in these situations and outright censorship by Google in this situation. You watch that ad, you tell me what the violation was exactly as far as anything that was spoken about. Gas prices and food prices are higher than they were when Joe Biden took office, significantly higher. And many black voters here in this country are not happy at all that illegal immigrants are coming into this country and being given all this free stuff in terms of lodging, in terms of phones, in terms of credit cards and food. And they see their social services collapsing around them because we're spending all this money taking care of illegals. So I don't understand what was wrong with that ad that was remotely controversial, but Google obviously doesn't think there's something wrong with the ad too, but you're right. They are trying to weaponize big tech. Once again, we'll see it from Facebook. We'll see it from Google. We won't see it from X, I don't think, because Elon Musk is now the owner and things have changed over there. But I think people are onto this, and probably now this ad's going to be seen by more people because of it went viral on social media anyway than they would have if Google just allowed it to be played.
And it is fascinating. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've found in my work that using Google as a search engine for anything that's remotely political is now almost useless because of the sort of results that it winds up putting out or trying to hide from you because it knows what you're going for. But I'm glad you mentioned the migration issue because we're also seeing that in places like Chicago, big Democrat stronghold. Locals are saying that black voters are turning on the Democratic Party because of the migrant crisis. Here's another resident having something to say about this on Fox. Have a look.
The Democratic Party has counted us for so long, counted our votes for so long, to the point where they don't even try to appeal to the black community, the black voters at all. But there's been a shift taking place here in Chicago. So many of our black members have decided to change over, to switch from blue to red.
So what does Joe Biden think about this? Let's have a look at this here.
Can you imagine a kid 2 years old saying, "Mom, don't take me across Rio Grande, it's against the law"? Give me a break. These have been model citizens.
Model citizens. I kind of feel like people like Lake and Riley's family would have a little bit something different to say about this.
That was, of course, the young woman, 22 years old, murdered on the campus at the University of Georgia, bludgeoned to death, James. I mean, and the person that was responsible was an illegal immigrant from Venezuela who had been arrested in the United States before and should have absolutely been deported the minute that happened. And of course, it didn't. And here you have the president of the United States saying that they're all model citizens. No, they are not. Hundreds upon hundreds of terrorists have passed into the United States through the U.S. southern border. That's not Joe Concha's opinion, or I'm just trying to gaslight your viewers right now. That is according to the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI. And now we don't know where a lot of those people are. And we saw what happened on October 7th. And if we see another September 11th here in the United States, and it ends up being because of folks that crossed over the border looking to do harm here, and the president did nothing about it, then obviously that is a completely impeachable offense, no question. Hopefully that does not happen. But the border is the biggest, probably along with immigration, obviously they go hand in hand, issue that we have here in the U.S. right now, just behind the economy and crime. And if those three issues end up being the big three issues in this election, Donald Trump not only wins, he wins in a landslide, 40 states, not seen since 1988. That's what we're talking about here, if that ends up being the three biggest issues in this country.
I think you're absolutely right about that. I mean, you just see the bizarreness, too, that these Democrat strongholds are taking the brunt of it. I think the politics of this could be really bad for the Democrats. Thanks for your time, Joe Concha, as always. We're going to take a short break before talking to Kelly Jane Torrance of the New York Post. But before that, how about another episode of Joe versus Reality? Okay, on this week's episode of Joe versus Reality, the president appears to have a little trouble with his teleprompter, recalling the name of his theology teacher back when he was back at school.
My theology professor at the Catholic school I went to was a guy named Riley, last name, and he had been drafted by the Green Bay Packers.
Yep, good old Riley, last name. Apparently drafted by the legendary Green Bay Packers he was. And yet, as with so many other things, maybe not. Because it turns out Biden told a bit of malarkey. Again, according to the New York Post, that draft never happened. They checked, and only one person with any spelling of the last name Riley since the NFL began its college draft in 1936 ever went across to the Packers. The Post reports that University of Colorado quarterback Maurice Tex Riley was selected with this 202nd overall pick in the 22nd round of the 1947 draft after his education was interrupted by World War II, during which he commanded bombing missions over the Pacific. But he never did play pro ball, and he stayed, this guy, not Biden's Riley, stayed in the military and finished up as an Air Force Major General. A career which, in the end, was probably a bit easier on the knees. Kelly Jane Torrance, up next. Welcome back to the program. Kelly Jane Torrance joins us momentarily. She's got big news out of the swing states. But first, news from the world of comedy, where apparently it's now safe, okay, and allowed even to make fun of Joe Biden, even on late-night comedy programs where used to be the only allowable target would be the big orange man. Check this out. The great American comedian Dana Carvey, who used to lampoon George Bush so mercilessly, here giving us his guide to doing a good Joe Biden impression. And by the way, I'm just going to take credit for this here, but you'll note we've run through a few of these items here before.
But Biden came out as a really sleepy, sweet grandpa, and he was like, he's always repeating this story, you know. Yeah, I went to Scranton. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. My dad lost his job. No joke. I'm not kidding around here. No human being in the world thinks that's a joke. Nobody. Is anybody that lost his job? And then, my dad, then he would do the number thing. Number one, the one part. Number two, what the guy said. Number three, you know the drill. Come on. No, we don't. Now what he does is he kind of whispers and then he yells. If you know, I think it's a wonderful move. Don't you love it when he's like, we know how to get natural gas. Because we can get it. We know how to get it. That's what we do. We take the people that run the public, the pirates of the Caribbean.
You gotta whisper, then you gotta yell. It's not a joke. And you know what else is not a joke? This swing state situation, which is where, despite the national polls all trending Trump's way, is where the actual election night is going to come down to. Now, let's take a deep dive into the state-by-state races and a lot of other fun stuff besides with our next guest, Kelly Jane Torrance from the New York Post. Kelly, welcome to the show. You're leading now, this is exciting news, the New York Post's swing state coverage ahead of the presidential election. So we're talking about Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, maybe North Carolina too. Tell us, for our Australian viewers, because these are really diverse states and very different, is there any one particular item that basically is a thread that runs through all of these swing states that makes them so volatile one way or the other?
Well, it's a great question, James. I have to say I am very excited to be leading our swing state coverage, and we're hiring, people in all of those states, plus Ohio. Some of them we're going to be hiring more than one person to be reporting. And of course, we'll be doing some of the reporting that the rest of the media won't be doing, especially on the Democrats and what they're up to. And I have to say, it's been a great learning experience just interviewing people for the positions. Obviously, I know something about all of those states, but when you talk to people who have been on the ground there for years, you get a real deep dive into what's going on. And, the economy, of course, is often the issue that decides elections, but it has a bigger role in some states than others, is one thing I am hearing. Wisconsin, for example, the Republicans are apparently messaging really hard on the economy. It's not really, voters aren't really relating to that. What Democrats are focusing on is abortion, and that is something that people are responding to. So you have a lot of issues that everybody is interested in, but some states, they're going to be more interested in some of those issues than others.
I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting to me here is how a lot of these states, many of these states don't have a big metropolitan urban conurbation in them, which is obviously always usually a big center of gravity for the Democrats. Is it the fact that there's more rural voters? And just, in my experience, whenever I'm back in the States, going to places like upstate New York or Pennsylvania, economic concerns still, though, drive things. So you mentioned, though, the abortion issue, reproductive rights. Is there a plot by the Democrats to really activate women voters in some of these states to try and get those back over in the Democrat column?
There definitely is. And ever since the Dobbs Supreme Court decision, which of course overturned Roe v. Wade, Democrats have been really campaigning. They used it in the midterms, and they're going to be continuing to use it because it has worked for them. It has drawn turnout for them. People will get really riled up about this issue, get worried about this issue, and it's going to be on the ballot in a number of states. I just got off the phone right before this interview with someone in Arizona, and of course they are working to get abortion on the ballot there. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the legislature and the Supreme Court in that state. So if that's on the ballot, that really can change things. Now, Arizona, it's almost like there's one huge metropolitan area with Phoenix, of course, and then Tucson's not too far away. Then you have Nevada, which is a huge state. You've got the Las Vegas metropolitan region, you got Reno, but then you've got a lot of smaller areas around the state, and there's some really interesting tight races in some of these House and Senate elections. So yeah, the economy is usually the top issue for everyone, but in some states the border is just as important, if not more so.
And another issue too, of course, that we haven't even touched on yet is the way the national chaos and the global chaos is going to feed into this as well. I mean, I was fascinated earlier this week that anti-Israel protesters came within a block of disrupting the Met Gala on the Upper East Side, defaced historical war monuments with Gaza, Free Gaza slogans. But I mean, it's like, this would seem to me, to normal voters, they'd say this is nuts because the Met Gala, this is all full of woke lefties. Who are they protesting here? And yet they're taking any opportunity to spread chaos. Surely this, though, this is going to be a big thing that many people who are on the fence are going to say, I'm sick of this. I want this to end. What are you hearing about that?
Well, you make a great point, James. They do want to just bring chaos, and it's more about attention-seeking for most of these people than actually getting any sort of policy change. They're loving the attention they're getting. Here just today, the new school, the faculty at that university have set up their own encampment. And they call it the first faculty encampment in America. Well, who knows if it is or not, but it's crazy. And yeah, it's funny because I thought the 2016 election, you could see some parallels in some ways with, Nixon getting elected in the 60s. And now with this campus chaos, it's looking like the 60s all over again. And that the Democratic convention this summer is going to have to figure out how to deal with these protesters because they're going to be all over the place. They want the attention, and that's certainly the place the cameras will be on for them to get it. But I have to say, I mean, everyone I know in New York, no matter that person's politics, is really just sick of this chaos and how crazy things have become. It's not, people that are worried about the civilians in Gaza. It's just a bunch of people who want to spread chaos and who are, quite a few of them, frankly, anti-Semitic. Of course, a lot of them are just stupid, as the New York Post has discovered. We talked to some of the reporters, talked to some of these protesters. They don't even know what they're protesting. Like at NYU, which is supposed to be, one of the best colleges in the country.
It's amazing to spend all that money and wind up that stupid. Kelly Jane Torrance, thank you so much. We look forward to talking to you down the track about everything happening across America. Sarah Gonzalez up next to break down the best lefty lunacy of the week, including the chaos on the border. But I just got to stay with those protests for a moment. I mean, I've been wondering, what are the logistics of feeding everybody who's going to join these things? I mean, at least the ones who are not on the hunger strikes. Well, turns out comedian Ben Bankus had similar thoughts, and he provided this helpful voiceover to footage of food being distributed at Columbia University.
Here you go. This is Chipotle. No, it's Chipotle. Sorry, they didn't really have that. Okay, here's another one. This one's gluten-free, so make sure that Stacy gets that one, okay? This one's gluten-free. This one is, I think this one's chicken, okay? Here's a vegetarian. Oh, that's really all they had. I'm so sorry. No, that's all they had. I understand. I'll do better next time. There was a tofu one here. Wait 1 second. Here's the tofu one. Okay, I'm going to go try to order some more at Chipotle. Thank you. You want a drink? You want a Coke? Okay, I'll get you a Coke.
Gosh, I don't know about you, but I'm getting a bit hungry. But don't go anywhere, because Sarah Gonzalez is coming up in a tick. Welcome back to the program. Now let's have a look at some of the week's other lefty lunacy with Blaze TV host Sarah Gonzalez. Sarah, thanks so much for coming on here. I want to talk about this story here, which I think says so much about where America is right now. A 16-year-old North Carolina student was suspended for using the term illegal alien in class. Now, they're taking legal action against the school district for harsh punishment, and this is the key bit here to me, false accusations of racism. Sarah, you interviewed the student's mother this week. What did she have to say about this incident?
Yeah, I mean, she gave details, James, that just made this more incredulous and just absolutely incredible that this school district behaved in this way. So what the mother, Leah McGee, told me was that this student, her son Christian, was asking for clarification on the vocabulary word aliens. So he simply asked his teacher, "Do you mean space aliens or illegal aliens without green cards?" At which point, one of his friends in class turned to him and, said, "I'm going to beat your butt." And they were joking, and it was all a big friendly, nothing was a big deal, except the teacher made it a big deal, escalated it to the administration, who told Christian that he was racist and that he was engaging in something that was just as bad as saying the N-word, they told him. And so they suspended him for 3 days. He wasn't allowed to participate in a track meet that was a very important track meet for that particular season, and he had to miss out. All because he asked for clarification on a vocabulary term that his teacher assigned him. I mean, it's just absolute madness. I think they have an amazing case. I know the Liberty Justice Center is taking their case on, and, they're suing for, of course, they're saying that the school breached his First Amendment rights, his right to due process because he wasn't allowed to appeal, and of course, his right to an education, because there were 3 days where he was not allowed to go to school, and they tarred and feathered him as a racist because he asked for clarification on a question. And by the way, it shouldn't be lost on you that every single administrator in that school is white, of course.
Oh, of course they are. You almost didn't need to tell us that. But I mean, we all know that racism is the worst thing you can tar somebody with on the left. And I hope that they win that case against the school district and just, take them to the cleaners. But it does seem to me that this is part of a much bigger plan that is happening to essentially shut down discussion, police the boundaries of what you're allowed to say about this border issue, and make talk of even defending the idea of a national border itself racist. And eventually, I presume, what's happening in America is to turn all of these illegals, and I'm going to say the word, into voters who will then be Democrat voters, which is why I suppose Democrats this week were against adding citizenship questions to the census and even checking voters are citizens, checking that they are voters before registering them. I mean, am I being paranoid, or is this where this is all going?
No, that's absolutely part of the plan. I mean, look, the great replacement theory is not a theory at this point. It's just happening right in front of our very eyes. It's why the Democrats, who are, look, they are the most racist political party in America. We see it day in and day out that they are projecting their own racism onto their opponent's political party. And so to have them be the racists. Of course, historically, they were the racists. They were the party of the Ku Klux Klan. They were the party of Jim Crow laws. And so to have them project the racism onto their opponents is just laughable. But at the end of the day, this is the plan, because we're seeing in states like in San Francisco, so in states like California, in Washington, D.C., and in New York, they are actually already allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections. This is all part of the plan. They're bringing them in. And not only are they allowing them to vote in local elections, they're also allowing them into these sanctuary cities where the next time, to your point, the next time that a census rolls around, they will be counted in all of these sanctuary cities, and there will be more representation in Congress given to those particular areas. And so that is how they're rigging the system. They know exactly what they're doing, and it's all part of the master plan to, again, replace us. It is all happening right in front of us. It's not a theory. It's not a far right-wing, conspiracy nut job theory. It's literally happening right before our very eyes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the old thing is math doesn't lie here. And it's funny, though, that you mentioned Democrats being racist, because there was an amazing story out of my old home state of New York this week where Governor Kathy Hochul, well, she was ripped to shreds after claiming that some black children in the Bronx don't know what the word computer means. Have a listen to this.
Because right now we have, young black kids growing up in the Bronx who don't even know what the word computer is. They don't know. They don't know these things.
They don't know what the word computer means? I mean, talk about, Sarah, the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah, and that's what we see from the Democrats day in and day out. I mean, you remember Joe Biden on the campaign trail last time around. He had so many oopsie racist moments. Poor kids are just as capable as white kids. He said on the campaign trail that, sometimes minorities just don't know how to get on the computer and look up where to get their COVID vaccine. I mean, we see this all the time with the Democrats, which is why it's just so laughable to pretend like they're so offended that someone uses the term illegal alien, when in reality, they are using the minority community, and they have for years. I've been begging the minority community to get off the Democrat plantation and start waking up to the fact that the Democrats are pandering to this community because it's all about the votes to them. This is no different, of course, Kathy Hochul. And you're right. It is the soft bigotry of low expectations, but that's what we see with the Democrats every single time.
And finally, this story was hilarious to me. I mean, hilarious but sad, but also we knew it was coming. The Boy Scouts of America, well, they can't be the Boy Scouts anymore. After 114 years, they're now just going to be called Scouting America. What do you reckon?
Yeah, what I reckon is that our boys here in America are in real trouble because they, the organizations that they have, that they can be taught to be real men, and they can be taught that their masculinity is something to be, to uphold and something to be proud of and something to be cherished, is getting slimmer by the day. Now with of course, the Boy Scouts saying, you know what, it's fine. We're just Scouting America. We welcome everyone. We want to be inclusive. Bring us all your trans, bring us all your LGBT. And so the kids here, the boys here, I have two boys of my own. They're in real trouble here because it is getting harder and harder for them to understand that it is okay to be a boy here in America. It's okay to be masculine. It's okay to hold doors open for girls and, to go shooting and all of the things that boys are traditionally supposed to enjoy. And it's getting hard for them.
Oh, well, Sarah, I'd love to have a chat about what some of the new merit badges might be, but we're going to have to leave it at that. Only in America is next, but first, if there was a woman who needs no introduction, It is Vice President Kamala Harris, who is still, despite this scene here, getting, well, an introduction from none other than Cheryl Lee Ralph. Yeah, I don't know her either. Anyway, have a look at this.
We are about to talk with one of the most capable, influential, bold, and fearless thinkers ever.
Bold and fearless thinker, you say? The most boldest and fearlessest ever. Is that right?
Ovaries. Fallopian tubes, right?
Uterus.
Fibroids.
Thank you.
Hey, babe, wake up. Kamala Harris is doing bits from Hannah Gadsby's new LP. Only in America is next. Welcome back to the program. And now it's time for a little segment we like to call Only in America. Right, well, you know things have reached a head when you lose Saturday Night Live. Once funny, now often preachy, but sometimes, yes, with a bit of insight. Let's go to a panel discussion the comedy show staged between liberal parents happy for their kids to protest Israel and one parent who knows what's what.
I think it's just great, you know, it's wonderful. Nothing makes me prouder than young people using their voices to fight for what they believe in.
Wow, that's very encouraging. Yeah. Alphonse, your daughter must feel so supported when she's out there.
What's that now? when whose daughter is out there?
At the protest.
No, man. You bugging. Alexis Vanessa Roberts better have her butt in class. Let me find out she in one of them damn tents instead of the dorm room that I pay for.
Wait, I thought you were in favor of the student protest.
Brother, man, I am supportive of y'all's kids protesting. Not my kids. My kids know better. Shoot, Alexis Vanessa ain't crazy.
Well, Alphonse, your daughter attends Columbia. What do you think about the students that took over Hamilton Hall?
That's good for y'all's kids. But they ain't mine. That's all I'm saying. They ain't my kids. You feel me, Ryan?
Yes, I feel you, Alphonse. But tell me, with the rise in attendance in these protests, how does it make you feel to see the increase in police presence? Sarah, are you concerned about students being arrested?
Very concerned. I mean, one of my worst fears is my daughter getting thrown behind bars. This is a crucial time in her life, and I'd hate for her to have an arrest follow her forever.
Man, I ain't worried about 5-0. That is not my business. My business is Alexis Vanessa Roberts, okay? She ain't talking about no free this, free that, because I tell you what ain't free, Columbia.
Alexis Vanessa Roberts, she better get all A's. And hey, where'd that plus go, you hear? That's all the time we've got, but in the meantime, hit the books. Bye-bye.